Carly.
And I'm Thomas.
And this is Dixon's AP U.S. History, bringing you the brewing of the Civil War. We're going to start off today with a quote by our loving president, Abraham Lincoln. I consider the central idea pervading this struggle is the necessity that is upon us, of proving that popular government is not an absurdity. We must settle this question now, whether in a free government, the minority have the right to break up the government whenever they choose. If we fail, it will go far to prove the incapability of the people to govern themselves. Abraham Lincoln, May 7th, 1861. And this sums up the brewing of the Civil War.
So to start out today, we have on February 2nd in 1848, the Mexican War was over with the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and America was ready to deal with its internal struggles. One of these struggles was overcoming the issue of new states and the right to be free or slave states. The South was arguing for the admission of new slave states, while the North was completely against it. Meanwhile, the West had other plans entirely. This disbandment of beliefs would eventually lead to the disbandment of states after their succession, the Civil War, and finally their admittance back into the Union. Congress decided to settle this issue by giving everyone a little bit of what they wanted. They passed the Compromise of 1850, which essentially let the new territories of New Mexico, Nevada, Arizona, and Utah declare their own ideas of being slave or free once they applied for statehood. It also pleased the North in making California a free state, and it pacified the South by enacting the Fugitive Slave Act to go along with it.
The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 was very, very influential in causing the Civil War. This act stated that citizens all over the country, specifically the North, would need to assist in the capturing of runaway slaves, and all federal officers would be fined if they were found not doing so. This made the public, who generally was on the fence about slavery, very, very angry. It promoted abolitionism even more. The act stated that fugitive slaves would not be given a trial by jury. As a result of this, many slaves that had been living in the North had to flee to Canada in order to remain free. In addition to these two main points, the act also made it easier for slaveholders to file claims on their runaway slaves, and it promoted more enforcement of officers. This was one of the harshest and most controversial acts in American history, and disrupted thousands of lives.
Next we have Uncle Tom's Cabin. Uncle Tom's Cabin was a novel by Harriet Beecher Stowe about slavery from the perspective of slaves themselves. It was a bestseller at the time, selling over 10,000 copies in the United States. The novel ignited strong feelings of abolitionism in the North, because it illustrated the horrors of slavery and how it is truly an abomination. It was met with strong opposition and criticisms, and one Southern author even retaliated with Aunt Phyllis's Cabin, which made slavery seem a lot better than it was, in hopes of calming the abolitionist feelings in the North. By this point, though, it was already too late. If the Compromise of 1850 didn't get people off the fence, this did.
Soon after, in 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act was passed, enabling the territories of Kansas and Nebraska to choose whether they wanted to be free or slave. Violence broke out within the following 2 years, especially in Kansas, as the pro-slavery and anti-slavery citizens refused to stand down. This violence dubbed Kansas the nickname Bleeding Kansas, and the country was on the verge of a breakdown. This was evident when the events in Kansas led to physical fights in the U.S. Senate. On May 21st, 1856, Charles Sumner, a pro-abolition man, was attacked with a cane by Preston Brooks, a pro-slavery man. After Sumner gave a speech that stated how the pro-slavery people in Kansas were the problem. And here they are fighting with the cane.
Sumner actually took over a year to survive this and came back over a year later to his job in Congress.
Mm-hmm. And as you can see, it was very chaotic in the room. You could see some people are smiling, some people are very upset. This man over here looks particularly happy.
Preston Brooks was actually banned from the Senate and then was immediately re-voted for by the state of South Carolina, which he represented.
Mm-hmm. This shows just how strong the South felt about being pro-slavery.
In 1857, a landmark decision was made in the courts. Dred Scott attempted to win his own freedom by moving to a free state and then suing because his owner came and removed him from the free state. Dred Scott's view was that since slavery was illegal in the free states, he could not be held as a slave if he lived there. The court did not agree and ruled against Dred Scott. They also went on to say that property could not be taken away from the owner and that because of that, the Missouri Compromise was illegal. This would increase the efforts of the abolitionists.
And here's Dred Scott right here. As a result of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, Kansas was allowed to hold a vote to determine if they would be a free or a slave state. The Lee-Compton Constitution was sent to D.C. for approval. This state constitution would permit slavery in the state. U.S. Congress shot down the Constitution and the statehood request because Kansas would open to slavery. Kansas decided that they wanted to become a free state, revise their constitution, and join the Union. And this just goes to show just how strong each side was in Kansas because they kept flip-flopping and there was a lot of violence going on.
This constitution was actually tried to be pushed through by a small group of people who were trying to overshadow the actual desires of the state of Kansas, and only pushed through this pro-slavery constitution because they felt as though it was what they wanted. When D.C. shot it down, Kansas elected more than willingly to stop the idea of slavery in their state. In 1859, a radical abolitionist displayed some extreme acts of aggression against supporters of slavery. John Brown, along with 17 other abolitionists, raided the federal arsenal on Harper's Ferry. These men had intent to arm slaves with the captured weapons, but were then surrounded and tried for treason, and then hung.
Also, unfortunately, not many slaves showed up to this slave raid.
That's actually why him and his supporters were actually so easily surrounded and tried, because they didn't have any backing that they thought was going to be there.
Finally, on November 6, 1860, Republican candidate Abraham Lincoln was elected president despite the fact that he received no Southern Electoral College votes. This made South Carolina and 6 other states secede from the Union. Lincoln was a moderate, but his election led to the succession all the same. The election of Abraham Lincoln was considered the last straw and was one of the final events leading up to the Civil War, because Lincoln was obviously not supportive of slavery, and he didn't show any Southern interest at all, as indicated by the Electoral College votes that weren't really there. So yeah, there's Abe. Thank you for watching The Brewing of the Civil War with Carly
and Thomas.
I hope you have a great day.